Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show. Now for this week I have brought on a teammate of mine, Crawler, to talk about a paladin deck he has been working on recently. Introduce yourself, Crawler.
Hey everyone, I've been around playing Hearthstone for quite a while. I've been mostly playing Paladin, and this is pretty much the Paladin deck I've come up with for the current meta, in particular with dealing against Freeze Mage and all rogues.
Yeah, now this deck, or at least a prototype of this deck, made literally an hour before the event, was actually used in the Gauntlet of Legends finals. We were trying to figure out an aggressive deck, and it turned out Crawler to play one, so threw together a Divine Shield Paladin. And it turned out the deck was better than we thought it was.
In the tournament, it actually lost, but it was more actually due to the mistakes between ourselves and miscommunication and actually lack of time to think about what we should actually do. So we actually just disagreed.
Instead of the deck being bad. So it was, after that, how have this been doing for you on ladder actually?
On ladder, it actually has like over 65% win rate. I think it actually has roughly 70% win rate. My Hearthstone stats actually has 69% logged right now. Though things have been incorrect, I'm not sure why that's there. The interesting thing is I had like a 10-win streak, but apparently I didn't record it on the stats, so it's always what happens.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we'll start on with the actual deck. Now, the first thing I noticed about this deck is that the first card is a Blessing of Wisdom. What's going on with this card?
It's actually a thing I added in like today, and I had to add it in just because I saw people playing Hunter more, and I saw people playing Mech Mage a lot more. And the problem I had with those is the fact that instead of trading or trying to get efficient trades, they were just going for face. So I had Avenge in that place or in that spot before, and Avenge just lost me like a couple of games just because it's like it didn't do anything for me. So I just thought of replacing it with something else. And Blessing of Wisdom just seemed like a good choice just because I could force people to trade into it. I've got other choices like Blessing of Might or like the 2/4 Secrets Healer. I don't remember the name of the card. To actually keep you in the game more, but this is basically an aggressive deck, so you need card draws and you need to actually go into the game.
Yeah.
And just force your opponent to trade with you.
The 3-mana 2/4, right?
Yeah.
Illuminator. I never thought I'd have to check that card, but anyway. So Blessing of Wisdom is going on their guys more than yours, I'm guessing.
On their guys? What do you mean?
Well, you can, I mean, using it on their guys so they...
most often you actually use it on your own card.
Okay,
so you want them to trade into it.
Okay,
so you would use it on a guy with a Divine Shield like Argent Choir or an Artron or Shielded Minibots or Scarlet Crusader.
Oh, okay.
You basically just want to force them to actually trade into you. It's basically a tech card you added in against aggro decks, which get more tempo than you. Because usually this deck is quite aggressive, and if you do get the perfect draws, you won't really have any problems with our aggro decks. But if you don't get the perfect draws, you might get into trouble.
Okay. So yeah, the next thing down here is Redemption, and I guess we'll follow this up with Divine Shield Engine in this deck, basically. So Redemption is a card which you're almost known for playing at this point. It seems to land itself as a one-off in almost every deck you come up with, but there's Divine Shields in this deck, which I'm guessing makes this much more powerful than normal.
Well, see, the thing is, Redemption, like, I think Redemption is actually undervalued, and I think people are actually picking up that it's getting better, or it actually is a good card. But it actually was a lot better before the nerf Secrets overall. So Blizzard actually changed Secrets to only trigger during your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Before it used to trigger during your turn as well, so I used to use Redemption in order to kill like my own Cairn or to kill my own Tyrion.
Back then.
Or yeah, Argent Commander as well. So it actually worked. It was a lot better card then, and it actually is still a good card right now because you can actually gain a lot of tempo off of it. If you get like Scarlet Crusader revived as a free one, which is basically the same Scarlet Crusader being played, you get free mana value for 1 mana. So that's quite a lot of tempo gain. And it usually is quite annoying, and the fact that you can usually use it as a secret as well is it can put people off. They can think it's Avenge. In particular, people actually thought that's why it was when Extramus came out. And they can think it's Noble Sacrifice as well. And they're just like the actual factor of it being a secret and the person not knowing what it is actually gives you a lot. So you just have to play around it.
Alright, so Redemption is most commonly going to be comboed with Divine Shield minions. So the ones you're playing are Argent Squire, a Neutron, Shielded Minibot. Coghammer kind of counts because it gives shields to other things. And
but it doesn't revive with the Divine Shield. That's the issue with it.
Yeah. Then there's Scarlet Crusader and the Blood Knight. 2 Blood Knights. That's a lot of buffs coming from these Blood Knights, I should imagine.
The reason with putting Blood Knight into the deck as well, you've got a lot of Divine Shields yourself, but actually you can use the other people playing Anoratrons as well to buff your Blood Knight, because Anoratron is quite a popular card right now, so it's just something you can actually do.
Make a 6/6 off their Anoratron against Mech Mage.
Yeah, basically it can just win you the game right at that point. And you can actually combo Redemption with Dr. Boom or any of his Boom bots, just in case you actually need more damage, or you can use Redemption even to revive your own 1/1 guy if you plan to play Quartermaster next turn. So
yeah, just to try and keep the tokens on the board for the muster.
Yeah.
The muster, yeah. The other thing I noticed in this particular deck is, while there's the standard sort of aggressive Knife Juggler, Shield Minibot, inequalities and things like that, there's also Divine Favor, which is a card that doesn't see that much play. Now, I know there's been a lot of aggressive decks running around right now, so how has this actually been?
Well, the thing is, the name of the deck is basically Divine Shockadin. It's basically a combination of Divine Shields and like the way Shockadin used to be before. And the reason for that, I think, is because of the Divine Favor. So it is running pretty well and is being used pretty well. The issue you had with Shockadin, or one of the tricky matchups, used to be Zoo. And people are not really playing Zoo anymore. So you've got a lot of aggro decks playing mech cards, which actually give them cards like spare parts.
Yeah.
And you can actually use this to your advantage, and you can actually gain more cards from them having spare parts in their hand. You can just draw more cards out of them. So it works pretty well. And as I mentioned before, this deck was actually built to counter both Mech Mage and Oil Rogue. And Oil Rogue just tends to keep a lot of cards in their hand, and it just works really well.
Divine Favor for 8 cards.
Yeah, works. It's especially funny, and one of the reasons why I guess people get salty when you win against them with this deck is, for example, when All Rogue preparation, like uses preparation and then springs.
And then you do the same thing almost, but less mana.
Yeah, you just use it for 1 card and 3 mana.
It's so good. So good against All Rogue.
Yeah, so.
It's also pretty good against, and probably one of the ways you can punch through Druid Taunt Wolves is if they have a slower hand, then you can just Divine Favor up.
Well, that's cards. The thing as well with Divine Favor is, or actually with this deck, is you basically have to know what cards you have in your deck, and you have to be aware of what cards are left in your deck, because sometimes you can just play Divine Favor, pull the card you need, and then just win the game. So basically, you just need to know what's left. You sometimes need equality just to finish the game, or you sometimes need like a hammer of Wrath to the face just to kill him, and you can just do it with Divine Favor. You can just pull it.
Now, speaking of hammer, I want to talk a bit about the 4-drops. Now, 2 True-Silver is a given in any Paladin deck ever created, I think. But there's 1 Consecration in here, and then 2 Hammer of Wrath, which is another one of your sort of signatures almost as the hammer.
Well, I've been playing. I initially actually had the hammers removed. That was probably like removed from most of my Paladin decks, and that was probably like half a year ago. But or maybe even more. I'm not sure. But I've tried Shockadin, and they actually had Hammers of Wrath in their decks as well. And I just saw how actually good of a card it is. So I've just put it back into most of my decks. And it's actually working pretty well. It's like a good way of dealing direct damage to your opponent. It draws you a card as well, so you can actually gain more tempo, and just works well. The thing is, you don't usually use it on turn 4. Usually you don't, but you'll use it on turn 6, turn 7, turn 8, in order to like get more cards, get more tempo, get more minions on the board, do more stuff than you would actually do.
Okay. The one consecration, I'm guessing, is just because you're playing an aggressive deck, so if you draw 2 at the same time, it just kind of stalls you.
Yeah, that's pretty much the entire reason. Another possible reason could be the fact that if you're playing against priests, which this deck doesn't really like, as you don't want to give them consecration from spot steals. So
less chance of the consecration, although knowing priests, they get it anyway. Anyway, so moving further down the list here, we've got one Defender of Argus, pretty powerful in these aggressive decks, although with Divine Shields and Taunt at the same time. We've seen this with Coghammer, the combination is a bit ridiculous. Yep,
well, it works really well with Scarlet Crusader. It's actually one of the reasons why a Rogue is why Rogue is having a tough matchup against this deck, is you can make a 1-on-1 guy with Divine Shield, a Taunt, a 2-2 Taunt. It's just annoying for Rogues.
So hard to get past.
Yeah.
Alright. Then we've got Quartermaster. Now, Quartermaster is one of those cards which is in almost all the Paladin decks that are playing Muster, so almost all the Paladin decks. But this is a one-of. Now, I'm guessing this is a similar reasoning to behind Consecrate, where if you draw 2, it's just bad. You just want the 1 in your deck because it's a bit slow.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. Another reason is the fact that you just want to keep it 1, just to be a threat for your opponent. Like, for example, if you're playing in tournaments, you often just put in one-of-a-kind cards just because you want your opponents to expect you to have that card or to play around that card, instead of just not having those cards at all. You don't want to put both of them just because it's too high. It's too high mana cost, and you sometimes do end up with, like, with my luck, I actually do end up with like my highest or most expensive cards in my starting hand, but
the curve is still pretty low on this deck. I mean, the majority is from 1 to 3 with a couple of 4s in there. Paladin is notorious for having a lot of 4s.
Well, but that's the thing. You don't really want to remove anything from the early drops. I guess the thing you could remove is Blessing of Wisdom, but then at the same time you're actually losing, or you would have more problems with, like, playing against aggro decks which actually get better draws than you. So I'm actually pretty happy with just having one Quartermaster, because I never had the issue of having both of them in my hand and thinking, like, if only this Quartermaster were something else.
Yeah.
So
now, the last 2 cards in the deck, I'll just talk about Boom first. Boom, I mean, if you're playing, the funny thing about Boom is if you're playing a slower deck, you often don't play him on his own if he's the only big game hunter target, because it's just not worth the value. But in the faster decks, the Boom bolts doing that amount of damage is enough, and if you get 1 attack in without the big game hunter, you win pretty much.
Well, it's just a big minion that people have to deal with, and with aggro tempo decks, you basically just want to force them to actually deal with your cards instead of putting their own minions and their own things on the board. And Dr. Boom, like, the thing with Dr. Boom is that it should get nerfed just because you don't really have any way of dealing with it with just 1 card. You need at least 2 cards to deal with it, and even then it's like inefficient. You
Twisting Nether, take 8 damage.
Yeah, that's the issue.
Yeah. Now, something to note is, have you tried Tyrion in this list? Or is it just too slow?
I think Tyrion would be okay in this list, but it would just get more control-ish.
Okay.
As I said, with my luck, I get late game minions in my starting hand, or at least one of them. So if you added Tyrion in, you might sometimes get into the position where you would get Tyrion, Boom, and Avenging Graph in your starting hand. In this case, you might get 3 of them, but the 4th one is going to be something you'll be able to play in 4 turns.
Yeah.
So that will be a bit better.
So Tyrion should be okay in this list, but yeah,
Tyrion
it
would
does add
work
to the
really
curve.
well with Redemption.
That's true.
It's one of the things you can actually change in this deck to make it more controlish,
So
to make it a lot stronger.
worth
But
trying out, in other words.
yeah,
Alright, now the last card is one of my favorite Paladin cards that I just haven't seen played for a very long time. Avenging Wrath, the big bursty spell from Paladin.
yep.
How's this work for you?
It works really well, just for the damage and for clearing out their board. Against aggro guys, it works well just because you can actually exchange a lot more efficiently than them, or you can just clear your board and just go for face. So it's really good, and
It's
when you
almost like
combo it with
Pyroblast
balls, it's
sometimes.
just good. Yeah, you can just use it with that as that often, like against Hunter especially, because like, well, you can rush for my face, but I can rush for your face too. So I'm just gonna do it first.
Just race them with Avenging Wraths and hammers.
Yeah. Well, actually, True Silver is kind of like the key card against Hunter. You just want to get True Silver and just hit your face pretty much most of the time.
Deal 4, heal 2.
Yeah. And against Hunter, it's usually a race of who kills the other one first. That's actually been the way it's been going around in the Paladin against Hunter matchup for quite a long time. With Paladin, you can do it in a sort of different way as well. You can try to counter Hunter by having a lot of heals, but it usually doesn't work out against other matchups, so it's just better to actually just race him.
Okay. Now, before we go into matchups, I want to talk a bit about different cards that you can possibly try out. Now, we did mention Tyrion being a potentially late game one. Now, something else I noticed was actually the fact that Loatheb isn't in this deck, and that just seems to be the perfect kind of archetype for the 5-mana 5/5.
Well, I was trying to get this deck to be as quick as possible, and Loatheb just seemed like a late game 5-drop,
Okay.
which wouldn't give you immediate effect or immediate damage. Dr. Boom always deals at least some kind of amount of damage just because of the bombs. And then, like Quartermaster, you usually just play it when you've got your hero power guys on the board,
Which
and
does
you've got
damage,
your
yeah.
dudes on the boards, and you actually just increase your damage. Argus does the same, so pretty much all the guys, all the minions above 4 mana just have to give you immediate effect, and Loatheb doesn't do that, so that's why I didn't add it in. I guess it would work probably against Priest as well, which is kind of a hard matchup for this deck.
Maybe Control Warrior.
Yeah, would work against that as well, but it's just sort of like one of the cards that I don't really... When you want tempo, I think this card could be replaced with something else, because with phase decks or extremely aggressive decks, you just want to go for phase and get immediate damage, instead of putting a minion on the board and then expecting it to get a chance to deal some damage.
Okay, that makes sense. Alright, so let's see if there's anything else to go over. Now, were there any other Paladin cards that you were actually thinking of adding? There's like Eldor Peacekeeper, Argent Protector, even Sword of Justice, I guess.
I was trying to add Argent Protector initially, but it just didn't work. It was just too slow.
Okay.
Elder Peacekeeper would work if you were planning to play against more control-ish decks. But the card I would love to add into this deck, but I just can't seem to find the place, is Blessing of Might. It's also one of the cards I've been like, that just got a lot of value in my mind after playing like free-to-play Paladin or like basic Paladin decks, and playing Shockadin. It's just been really good. So.
Okay. Now, there was actually one other card I want to talk about, which was Mad Scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to fit Mad Scientist in this deck? Because you are playing 2 secrets, or I mean, playing 2 secrets with Mad Scientist is a bit dicey.
Mm-hmm.
But I could definitely see maybe having one in the deck.
Well, you could add it in, but I just don't like playing redemption when you don't, or like giving your opponent the option of getting your redemption out when you don't know where you'll need it or not. I think it's better if you play redemption when you think you'll need it, or having the option of playing redemption when you need it, because mad science just doesn't give it that to you.
I guess.
So adding one could be okay, but
you draw through your deck a lot actually because of Divine Favor, so that does actually come into the equation sometimes.
don't know.
Alright.
It's an option. It's possible you can add it in, but I just didn't find a place for it. I think Blessing of Might would be higher in my priority list to actually add into that instead of Mad Scientist, but
that's fair enough. But anyway, so before we close this off, how have the matchups been? You've talked a bit about Priest being a difficult one, a bit about Mech Mage and Rogue being pretty good, but how do the rest of the classes go?
Well, the rest of the classes, so apart from Rogue, Priest, and Mage, right?
Yeah.
I've got the stats on, so it's been 100% against Paladin.
Well, you're playing Blood Knight, which messes up shielded mini-bots a considerable amount.
Yeah, it's been 71% against Shaman, so you just get a lot of stuff on the board and you just kill him. It's been 80% against Warlock, so it doesn't matter where it's Zoo or where it's Handlock. I guess it works our way just because of the qualities.
Yeah.
50% against Hunter, so as I said, who kills who first, and 57% against Druid. Okay. So Druid is usually a bit tricky. If you get her qualities at the right time, you might kill him. And if you don't, and he gets like Keepers, which is usually the killer card for aggro, you might just have difficulties.
What about Warrior?
Warrior, yeah, that's a terrible match. It's got like 3% win rate. The issue with Warrior is the fact that it's basically a can. Like usually we play against Control Warrior. With Control Warriors, you just try to kill him. You get to turn 9, he Alexstrasses himself, and he just continues playing. And he just can't deal with the armor. Sometimes if you get Divine Favor at the right time, you will be able to kill him, but it's just pretty hard. It's a tough matchup.
Okay.
It's one of the matchups you wouldn't want to get into.
Alright, so basically bad matchups being Priest and Warrior, the healing classes.
Yep.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything else you want to go over?
Probably not. Not really.
Alright then.
Possible changes for the deck would actually be changing Blood Knight to like Mukla.
Interesting.
To make it more fun.
I guess, yeah, I mean, if you want to have fun, throw bananas at people.
Yeah.
And
pretty much the key card for this deck is Divine Favor, as far as I've seen being used. Even though I didn't have it before, or like initially when I was building it. But I think Mukla could actually synergize well with Divine Favor. So it's one of the cards where, like, even if you're playing against Zoo, you might get value with Divine Favor. Given bananas, get some cards.
I might try that out actually. Yeah. Straight up 3 mana 5/5s followed by draw more cards. It sounds fun.
So yeah, if people like, kind of a weakness of this deck is your opponent playing Blood Knight himself. If he does play it, it's not over. You might still win. It's not like
it's close.
It gets a bit more gets more difficult because you're kind of forced to use equality most of the time. Or you just go for face and try to stall him with Annoyatrons or so. Annoyatrons and Redemption, possibly. But, yeah, so if people do start playing Blood Knight more often, you might just consider removing Scarlet Crusader and possibly Blood Knights, because if people do play Blood Knights, they'll just play one.
Yeah, maybe like one Blood Knight, one Scarlet Crusader, go for some other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. Thanks for coming on, Crawler. Definitely a very interesting deck. It's the first aggro paladin deck I think most people have seen in months, quite frankly. But anyway, any social information that that Crawler would like to share, I'll put in the description, so go
Sure.
check down there. But anyway, thanks for joining me.
No problem.
But as for now, this has been Jotto and Crawler signing off for the day.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye bye.